All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this video. You may be watching it in webinar format or on a video on Facebook or YouTube, but we're going to go through a couple of things today. I'll try and keep it as short and concise and accurate as I can. And the topic we're going to go through today is called Australia's Business and Investor Migration Program. And we've updated this for 2022. So there's the 2022 edition of Australia's Business and Investor Migration Visa Program. If you've never met me before, my name is William. You might have seen some of our other webinars. I'm typically the host for them, and I'm part of the team here at Austral Migration Consultancy. We recommend you look through our website to have a look at these details, but if you haven't heard about us before, we are one of the few Australian law firms based in Singapore, where I am, and also in Malaysia, where we have a couple of offices as well. We are a U-Global verified migration professional, as well as a member of the IMC, which is Investment Migration Council. So we've been doing this for coming close to 10 years, and we've had thousands of clients across the board, across many different visa types. Investor and business migration program is also included in that, and we're very, very specialized in doing some of these visas. Do encourage you to have a look through our website if you haven't been there before. Our website has a lot of articles about many of the different visa types. We try and answer as many questions as we can through across the different articles as well. So if you have a look through some of the articles, you'll see in the comments section that we typically try and answer quite a few questions there as well. If you've never been to our YouTube channel, you can go and have a look through. We try and upload a lot of these webinars there as well. So if you do miss, or if you want to have a quick replay of this, we'll try and upload it onto YouTube, and we'll try and add some more stuff over the coming months throughout 2022. So the first thing I want to touch on, if you've never been to Australia before, if you have family or friends there, then you may or may not know the main reasons that a lot of our clients say they're looking at migrating to Australia. So we've covered the 5 basic ones, which you can see here. From left to right, the very first one is Australia's public healthcare system, which is called Medicare. So Medicare is funded by tax revenue. And what it does is it gives you free access to public healthcare, such as public hospitals and public clinics. So if you have any issues, you need to go to the public hospital, your Medicare card will typically take care of pretty much everything. So you're well protected in terms of any health issues. The second one, if you have, typically business owners and investors, they have older kids, and if your kids are secondary school looking to go on to university level education, then you probably know that Australia has a lot of pretty good, well-ranked universities amongst the world rankings. A lot of them are spread out across different states of Australia. So the education system is pretty well known from secondary school, primary, through to university as well. The third image you see there, it just represents the different cities, the different lifestyles people live by choosing to live in different parts of Australia. Now, there's plenty of land because it is a very big landmass, house and home kind of builds. Those are the kind of things people look at. Obviously, the cities have a very good balance of culture, safety, economy, economic factors, and so on. The fourth image you can see there is just more of a personal preference. It is things like the food and beverage scene in Australia, which is a very, very popular pastime there. You get to eat very good foods and so on. And obviously the last one is a very good work-life balance. So if you're starting a business, if you're just going back into the workforce as an investor, typically your work hours are still very comfortable. Australia has a culture of working enough and getting paid very well for that. It's just something that's been inculcated across many generations. So very good work-life balance for pretty much anybody who lives and works in Australia. So that's just really quick few sound bites of why people, what a lot of our clients tell us are the main reasons that they choose to migrate over to Australia. So if we have a look at specifically the business environment, especially if you're looking at starting a business there, Australia has a few things going for it. It has a very good location in the Asia Pacific region. It is the tip. I mean, New Zealand is slightly further south, but Australia is the main predominant country that you can find in the Asia Pacific region, which puts it well positioned to trade with Asia as one of the few Western countries in this part of the world. Politically and economic stability is pretty standard. It is a well-run country, although yes, they have changed a lot of prime ministers over the years. Still, the political environment has its checks and balances. So some years it's one party, other years it's the other party. So they keep themselves politically well in check. Economy is relatively stable in the region. They've got a very well-educated, trainable workforce, and in the main reason for that is that there are a lot of domain-specific expertise. So, for example, if you want to hire people to do the construction of your house, you're going to hire specialist builders, and these specialist builders, their staff will be specially trained specialist builders as well. So they've got certificates and specialized training to do everything they need to do. So that makes them not just able to do jobs very specifically and very well, but also that they're easily trainable to do many of these things on top of that, right? And it goes across the line in different parts of these different sectors as well. Healthcare, education, and all, they're domain specific. So the training that these people have for them are specific to that domain. So you're going to have teachers who teach specifically, and they studied, specifically on education, same as healthcare and trades. Because it's a high wage country, they have minimum wage. They have a minimum wage across every sector. The amount of disposable income amongst the general population is typically quite high, so they are willing to spend. So if you have products or services that you are setting up in Australia, people are open to paying for what things are worth. So they're used to paying fair value for services and for products. And the last one is easy to set up a business once you become a resident, or even if you're setting up business remotely as a foreigner. Setting up business is pretty easy. It's either done through a corporate secretary or you can do it online. It's very, very straightforward, very similar to how it's run here in Singapore. In terms of the numbers, Australia is predominantly small and medium enterprises. If you can look there, I think it adds up to something like 99% of all businesses fall within the small and medium category. And you've only got 0.2% of the total number of businesses that fall in the large category, which is 200 employees and above, right? So the predominant setup of business structure in Australia is small and medium. So it is set up to be friendly towards that kind of structures, and it's something that's very common across the board. There are a lot of micro businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. In terms of when the revenue split up, very similar. Obviously, some of the larger organizations, some of the really, really big multinationals skew this number a bit, but revenue ranges, it's still mostly within the small and medium enterprises, which the bulk of revenue that is generated across Australia remains in. And then this next one shows kind of the categories. Obviously, if you look there, you can see that mining is a super outlier because it has such a large percentage of total revenues across industry. And the reason for that is, the big guns of Rio Tinto and BHP Billiton, they take up a large chunk of revenue and revenue generation just by the fact that they do what they do, right? But if you look at the rest, it's kind of well spread out. Services sectors are well represented. Public administration and education is more government funded, but all of the private sectors are relatively well spread out and well represented across industries. Now, we're going to touch on this pretty just base level because today's talk is meant to be about the business program for people moving over. So you're not a foreigner, you're technically considered a resident, and also the investor migration program. But if you're looking to start a business as a foreigner, meaning completely remotely, it is possible. You have to decide things which you'd have to decide wherever you're setting up a business, but you need to think about the type of organization. PTY Ltd is the most common, LLPs, LLCs, and so on. Incorporation is fast. It's corporate secretary or done online, less than a week to set up, affordable, less than $1,000 to do as well. Share capital required is low. You can have $2 companies if you want to. Foreign ownership is allowed. I'll step into a little bit more about the do's and don'ts, I think, in the next slide. But foreign ownership, full foreign ownership, meaning the shareholders are fully foreign entities or individuals, is allowed. A little bit about the company directors. Although foreign ownership, full foreign ownership is allowed, you'll need to have at least one nominee director. We don't necessarily have to have shareholding, but that's typically your corporate secretary or a local business partner. Somebody has to be Australian permanent resident or citizen to be your local director. You have to be 18 years and above, which is standard. You can appoint multiple foreign directors or entities, and ownership can be mostly or fully foreign owned. So very welcoming to setting up remote companies. if that's what you're looking at doing. But in terms of how it goes, again, it's very standard stuff. If you've set up businesses before, or even if you've done some cursory research on it, corporate secretaries, corporate company numbers, all very standard things that you need to set up. Your corporate secretary will be able to sort it out for you. If you're doing it completely remotely, you have to display your company numbers, ACN or ABN, as necessary across all of your marketing and financial materials. Now we'll talk about the do's and don'ts is the most important. And we're talking based as a fully foreign owner. So you're foreign owner, meaning you don't have residence, you don't have some sort of long-term visa to be in Australia. So the do's as a foreign owner, you're running the company remotely. Number one, rent premises. Your organization can rent whatever types of premises you need. Primarily, it's going to be commercial property for your shop, your office, whatever it may be, manufacturing. Buying property will have approval step involved, and that's going to be done by the FIRB, which is the Foreign Investment Review Board. The Foreign Investment Review Board review all types of business or foreign purchases of property. Now, could your company buy residential property? Yes and no, still up to the review board. Could it buy commercial property? Commercial property, unless it's of a gigantic scale, is typically okay. Again, you can talk to any real estate agent or anybody who can who's going to advise you on that, and they can advise you whether or not that is going to work out. You can also put the FIRB approval as a condition on your contract of purchase. Opening bank accounts, hiring staff, paying GST, expanding throughout Australia, no problem. You can do all that as a foreign-owned company. Obviously, you have to pay GST. I put the tick there. It's not that you can or you have to pay GST. The things that you can't do, one of the surprising things is that although they allow you to set up a business, grow it, get revenue, pay taxes, hiring yourself to run the business is not necessarily as straightforward as, let's say, here in Singapore or in our other offices in Malaysia. So if you're looking at hiring yourself in Singapore or Malaysia, it's pretty straightforward. You set up the business. Once it's kind of relatively operational, even before it's fully operational, you can look into doing a work visa. Now, Australia, that's not as straightforward to do. You can't typically hire yourself to run your own business unless you go to the business migration program, which we'll talk about later. Now, if you are a much larger organization, meaning you've already got a company set up outside of Australia and you're looking at expanding into Australia and you're thinking of hiring 40, 50 people, then hiring yourself may be a possibility, right? So if that's what you're looking at, just reach out to us on the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be able to kind of go through what options might be available for that kind of setup. You cannot pay less than minimum wage. You cannot undercut anybody. Australia's minimum wage system is by law, and if you breach that, your company will get into big trouble, heavy fines and so on. So you have to pay minimum wage and above. There's no such thing as, you cannot do discriminatory hiring practices. You can't ask for nationality. You can't ask for gender. You can't ask for whether they're going to have kids. Do they have kids? You can't ask their age. These kind of questions will allow people, potential hires, to say, well, they didn't hire me, and it's because they asked me about my age, or they think my age is not suitable. That's discriminatory. So keep that in mind if you are hiring staff. And obviously, you can't skip paying taxes. You must pay taxes that are due for your organization. So that's pretty much all we wanted to talk about as a fully foreign-owned business owner. But if you're going under the investor migration program or the business migration program, you'll be considered a local resident in terms of starting up a business and so on. So it's a lot more straightforward. But we'll talk about the initial investor migration program first, because the investor migration program is for those who are seasoned investors, business owners as well, but you don't necessarily have to have an existing business to qualify for the investor migration program. So if we look at the investor migration program, there are two pathways. They're both investor pathways. They're just different quantums of investment, and they have slightly different requirements. We refer to them by the visa number. So subclass 188B is for the investor stream, and subclass 188C is for the significant investor stream. So if you can't remember all the names of these visas, just remember 188B or 188C when you're talking to us, and we'll be able to know kind of which visa you're interested in. General requirements for each of these visas, there are a couple, but let's talk about how they kind of determine whether or not you qualify. The first check is going to be based on age. If you are below the age of 55, you can invest in either of these programs, the $2.5 million investment for 188B and the $5 million investment for 188C, right? And you can use your combined net value of yourself and your spouse combined. So they're looking at, number one, what is your net value, which is the numbers you see on screen. And then number two, that's the amount you're going to have to invest into one of Australia's financial fund managers, which we'll cover later. So if you're below the age of 55, then either of the programs is available. If you're 55 and above, then you're going to have to specifically choose the subclass 188C because that has no age limit. The 188B has an age limit of 55 years old, right? So we'll go through both of those. The very first one we want to touch on is the subclass 188B. Now, if you have any questions, just use the Q&A tab, drop us a comment below, or if it's private, then send us a direct message if you're watching this on one of our Zoom webinars. But starting with the 188B, which is the investor migration investor stream, provisional investor stream, the first thing they're going to check is that do you have net assets in your name, your spouse's name, or both your names combined of $2.5 million, and which has been held for each of the last 2 financial years. So we're in 2022 now, the financial year is not over. So they're going to look at 2021 and the 2020 financial years. They'll see, do you have access to that kind of assets, property, investments, bonds, stocks, cash, all sorts of different assets will be allowed to be added up together to get this type of, to show that you have $2.5 million. Then once they decide whether or not you're qualified to apply for the program, eventually they'll ask you to invest $2.5 million into an approved fund, which is split out into different tranches, which I'll cover in a later slide. The program starts as an investor visa first, and an investor visa holder is a provisional resident. And the reason for that is that they need you to stay a certain amount of time in Australia, which is 2 years out of 3, and you need to be able to, you need to hold your funds in Australia for that period as well, right? So once you fulfill those criteria, you can convert your residency status from provisional to permanent resident, right? That's the investor stream pathway. It's typically used for anybody under the age of 55 because it has the lower investment quantum. There is a point score, which we won't have time to go through today, but the point score is calculated based on your age. Do you have business? How many assets you have? Do you have a degree, English ability, and so on? If you'd like to go through and calculate your point score for you, please just drop us a message or use the link that we're going to send out to ask for your one-on-one consultation. We'll go through, we'd be very happy to calculate your point score, kind of advise you on how that works. So that's the first one, the investor stream, which is the subclass 188B. The second one is called the significant investor stream, or the subclass 188C. The main difference is that in this visa type, because the quantum of investment is higher, number one, there's no age limit. So you could be any age to apply for this. So typically those who are 55 and above would be using this pathway. The amount of assets in your name or your spouse's name or both names combined only needs to be seen in a single snapshot. So if you have access to $5 million in assets at this very point in time, you already qualify for this visa because they do need you to invest $5 million into a complying investment, which is the mutual fund. Sorry, not the mutual fund, the approved funds, which I'll kind of show you and discuss about later. The other main differences is the amount of time you have to stay in Australia. So the investor stream was a 2-year stay. So you need to accumulate a 2-year stay. It's not 2 years in a row. It's like you can add it up however you want, 6 months, doesn't matter. You can add, as long as it adds up to 2 years. This one is slightly different. It only needs 120 days, which is about 40 days per year. Which again, you can add up anyhow you want. If you want to do 40 days 1 year, 40 days in another year, or you want to do all the 120 days in a single year, you can do that as well. And then once you fulfill those criteria, you can convert your residency status from an investor visa to permanent residency. And so both of these programs are the predominant investor migration programs. Now, when you hold an investor visa, you're allowed to do quite a few things. You're allowed to start a business. You're allowed to be employed. You can go back to work if you want to. You can study for yourself, your spouse, or your kids. or you can choose not to do anything. It's completely up to you. With an investor visa, there are no conditions on the visa. It's besides the stay conditions in holding your investment. What you want to do while you're in Australia is completely up to you. When we were talking about how the investment is separated, you are investing into an authorized fund manager. And if you need to be introduced to some of the best fund managers in Australia, please do let us know. We're very happy to introduce you to them. They are the biggest ones and the ones that typically our clients use. You have to use a fund manager because the fund manager's job is to split up your funds into the tranches that you see on screen. And so basically, it's a fund of funds. The 20%, the first 20% goes into venture capital funds. The next 30% goes into small caps and emerging companies funds. And then the remaining 50% goes into balancing investments, such as bonds and commercial properties and so on and so forth. So once it doesn't matter whether it's the $2.5 million investment or the $5 million investment, it's still broken down into these tranches, right? And it's been defined by the Australian government to run like this. So you can't choose to invest your own money yourself. However, the fund managers will be able to give you what options are available within each of the tranches. So they will be able to tailor it as much as they can within each of these percentages based on your risk profile, right? Very happy to introduce you to these guys. They are authorized fund managers. Some of them are public listed companies as well. I've put an FAQ page because these are the most common questions we get. And obviously I will go through more of your questions as you're watching this or later on live as well. But these are the top questions we get about the investor program. Obviously the main question I get is, are the investments capital guaranteed? Will the government protect my funds once I've invested? And the answer is no. These funds are capital, they're market funds. So you invest as if you were any other type of investor. So they are market funds. They're not protected by the government or anything like that. However, having said that, it ties on to the next question: how much interest do we earn on them? And that obviously varies depending on which fund manager you use. But the fund managers that we typically introduce our clients to, they're so large and so big that what they've done is that they've pretty much focused exclusively on managing the funds of investor visa holders. And the benefit of doing that is that they are very conservative with your funds. They are not a typical hedge fund. They're not there to make tons and tons of gains. They're there to conserve your funds because you need to conserve and manage the tranches as per the government regulations for your visa. And so that's what they do. They will take some of the funds and they'll buy like an entire office building, for example, and they'll know that the office building is already tenanted by the Australian government for the next 40, 50 years. So they know, okay, that part of the fund is already going to net me X% over the next 30, 40, 50 years. So they're very conservative in the steps that they do. And going on to how much interest do they earn? The target interest for some of the bigger funds is like 6%, 6.5% per annum. And obviously it varies. You can be more aggressive. You can choose more aggressive breakdowns. You can choose slightly less aggressive ones as well. But some of the ones that our clients are using so far, so good. Different parts of the trend, or different parts of the fund will do better than other parts of the fund. But overall, most of the funds, they haven't lost any money yet, which is good. Touch wood. You have to understand that these fund managers, their job is to manage the funds for the investor migration program. And because of that, they know they need to manage your funds well for at least the next 3 or 4 years. Otherwise, you could choose to change to another fund manager. And so when they do that conservatively in a very practical manner, typically they maintain and grow your assets invested with them slowly and steadily, and then ultimately get you your permanent residency, transitioning from your provisional residency to your permanent residency. And that's the main purpose. A lot of these funds that our clients use, that's their main purpose of functioning. All right. Can you buy a house as part of the investment? No, that's not going to work. You have to buy a house on top of what you've already invested. Can you invest in any fund manager in Australia? Technically, the answer is yes. There are hundreds of fund managers, but there are only a few which specialize in the investor migration program. So we strongly encourage you to speak to an investor visa program specialist, because they know how to manage the fund, how the Australian government wants them to manage the fund. Yes, there are other fund managers which can invest your money and they kind of follow as best they can, but then when the Australian government comes and checks on it, they may or may not like it. So try and use people who've already got the investor visa holders across the line from investor visa provisional resident to permanent resident. Then you know that they've managed the percentages exactly how the Australian government wants them to. Can we recommend good fund managers? We're very happy to do so. Reach out to us on the Q&A tab or the chat function, and we'll connect you with some of the fund managers who have offices in Southeast Asia and in Australia as well. So the next section is about the business migration program. So the first section was about starting a business as a foreigner remotely. Second section is about the investor program. And lastly, it's about the business migration program. The business migration program it's quite different from the investor program. As a breakdown of the total number of visas given out for these programs, different countries have different volumes of visa applicants, which you can see on screen. But when you break down by the numbers, typically you're looking at about 7,000 visas granted as part of the business and investor migration program. I think 2021, 2022, maybe 2023, you're going to have about double of this number. So about 14, 15,000, because there is more of a focus on it over these kind of post-pandemic years. They're trying to spur economic growth. And so they're inviting more investors, inviting more business owners. So I expect that number to go to at least 10 to 12,000 per year. We've done, hundreds, over, I think at this point in time, 125 over the last couple of years. So they're in different stages of processing, visa grants, processing, and so on. But we have seen a lot of different business types, different investor profiles. So we do know exactly how to get many of these visas and many of these different profiles across the line. In terms of the business migration program, the main difference is that you have to be a current business owner. The business has to be running for at least 2 years, and you have to be under the age of 55. Now, there are some age waivers possible, which we'll talk about later, but typically most of the business owners that they're looking for are under the age of 55. There's going to be net asset requirements. There's going to be turnover requirements, which we'll go through after this. Again, there's going to be a business point score, which we don't really have time to go through today, but if you reach out to us, we'll be happy to kind of calculate it for you and see how that works for your profile. But jumping in, there really is only one business visa type. It's called the Subclass 188A, which is the business innovation stream. Now, all of the visas we've talked about today start with the number 188, which is a little bit confusing, but the 188A is the one for the business program. So if you're looking at asking questions about it, just know it's called, just refer to it as the 188A. We know exactly what you're talking about. So the first check is a value, net value and asset check of yourself and your spouse combined. They're looking at 1.25 million Aussie dollars in any type of assets, including business assets, personal assets combined. Second thing they're looking for is turnover or sales revenue. So the revenue that your company generates has to be at least 750,000 Aussie dollars and above for any 2 years out of the last 4 full financial years. So it's 2022 now. Because 2022 is not over, it's not a full financial year. So you have to go from 2021 backwards. So you're looking at 2021, 2020, 2019, and 2018. Now, obviously, because there was a pandemic kind of in 2020, 2021, some businesses didn't do so well in those years, but they did well in 2018, 2019. And if you did well in those years, I can still use your revenue from the good years to still apply for this visa to qualify, rather than wait another 2 years for you to hit those steady revenue levels again. So when you fulfill these main criteria, what happens is to say, okay, assets check done, revenue check done. Do you own at least 30% or more of the business? If so, great. Then you fulfill the criteria to be allowed to apply. Now, when you apply, they will look at various factors, but it is going to vary from state to state. All right, you're going to have to see what type of business are you going to start in Australia, because this visa requires that you have a business, have these financial criteria, and then when they give you the visa, they give you some time, but you will ultimately need to start a business in Australia and hit certain revenue thresholds, which is about $300,000, $400,000 in revenue. But they will need you to hit certain thresholds in a given amount of time. All right. It's going to vary from state to state, so we'd be happy to kind of go through with you on a one-on-one basis what it's going to be required for the different parts of Australia, but that's what you're going to need to do. You're going to have the prerequisites and then post-requisites criteria so that you can convert your residency from a business visa to full permanent residency. A lot of people ask, what type of business can I start, or what type of business have you seen work? So we've covered a couple of categories, which you can see here, but there's a little caveat on some of them. So let's go through some of them. So like the first one, we've had clients who started restaurants or moved over their own businesses. The person you see on the right, his name is Ian. He runs a chain of like a boutique suit shops. So he makes custom suits. So he had a chain of suit stores throughout Southeast Asia, and he started the same thing in Queensland. So in Brisbane, he has another chain. So he moved over his existing business. Food and beverage type of businesses, it's a little bit trickier. It depends which state you're looking at. Some states will be okay with you starting a restaurant, other states not so. So you have to see which state you're looking at. Property development, again, property development is very, very popular amongst our clients. They like to set up property development companies, which does, you'll buy like a plot of land, it will build maybe 3 homes on the land and then sell them to hit those revenue turnover requirements, the post visa grant requirements. Again, not every state allows property development, but states like Western Australia, South Australia typically do. A lot of our clients use one of those 2 states to kind of go down this pathway. And touching on the property development, there are custom solutions for you as well. So there are turnkey solutions where you kind of just buy it, let the builder sort it out, the project manager sort it out, and the business is kind of done for you. So you don't have to actively manage that business day to day, like how you might have to do a property development company outside. So we have access to a couple of those turnkey solutions. So do reach out if that's what you're interested in doing. In terms of investment, it varies, but I'd say $900,000 up to $2 million, depending on the state, for practical investment into this type of business. Agriculture and farming is really popular. A lot of our clients, they will export fruits and produce from different states out to Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, different parts of Southeast Asia and beyond, and they use that to hit their turnover requirements. South Australia has a very good program doing this. Victoria and New South Wales have some provisions for this as well, but it really depends on different states have different produce and pathways for the agriculture and farming. You don't necessarily need to set up a farm. You can do more like produce trading. So you can buy it from a grower, and then the grower will sell it to you, and then you ship it back to whichever country you want to, and then that kind of entire chain is how your revenue is generated. Obviously, the last one is the one that every state wants. They want technology, innovative businesses, whether it's innovative products or innovative services. They are willing to invite pretty much anybody who has this type of startup, technology, product, service, which is going to be innovative, especially in health sectors, technology sectors, fintech, manufacturing, all of these business sectors, very, very popular right now. So if you're in one of those sectors, your chances of getting into pretty much any state is pretty good, depending on what type of business you have. In terms of the visa process, it's the same or very similar for all of the 2 visas we talked about, the business visas and the investor visas. What happens is there are 5 stages of the process, and these 5 stages have to be done one before the next. The very first stage, that lies with us as the law firm. Our job is to check your business and personal assets assessment. So we have to assess whether or not you qualify based on point score, age criteria, asset criteria, whatever it may be. We need to see that you qualify before we even apply for the visa. We need to do the due diligence to make sure that everything fits in place, right? So that part is with us. We look through your documents, make sure everything is going to be okay when we do an application. Now, when we do the initial stages of the application, stages 2 and 3, you go into a pool of applicants. And what you have to know is that the investor program, business program, they're state-based programs. So you have to have an idea of which state you're predominantly going to live in. So if you want to apply to Victoria, which is Melbourne, New South Wales, which is Sydney, or Perth, which is Western Australia, all of these states have slightly different requirements. There are some businesses that they will allow to start there, and some businesses they won't allow. There are some investment criteria that they want, point score that they're looking at, and so on and so forth. So depending on which state you're looking at, you're going to have to fulfill those requirements as well. So if you have an idea which state you're looking at, if you know you do generally qualify, then again, reach out to us or use the link to kind of book in a consultation. We'll be happy to kind of go through that with you. Now, what happens in the pool is you make a proposal to the state, or we do on your behalf, we make a proposal to the state to say that you'd like to apply for the program, the investor or business migration program, for their consideration. They'll look through your proposal, your details, and within about anywhere from 30 to 90 days, typically, they'll come back with a yes or no kind of answer. If they come back with a no, there may be a grace period before you can try again, or you can look at other states. If they come back with a yes, then fantastic, you move on to stage number 4. Stage number 4 is called an invitation to apply. You will receive 2 invitations, one from the state and then one from Australia's federal government. They have 2 layers, federal and state in Australia. So state government is the lower level and then federal government is the higher level. They will issue an invitation. And this, at this point, is the main part of the process where you are actually making a visa application. So now you're paying the visa fees, they're doing the document checks, you've got to do your medical, you've got to do police clearances. They're doing a visa processing. Once your visa is processed, after some time, your visa will be granted. Timelines for this visa process is going to vary. On the low end, it can be a couple of months, especially for the significant investor program that is processed very fast. On the high end, you're looking at anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So it's not an overnight type of process. And the reason for that is it's a very popular program. The investor and business migration program is probably one of the top 5 types of this type of program in any part of the Western world. And I'd say it's probably number 2 in the world from applicants all over the world. So there's thousands of people applying for only these limited slots. So to stand out, we try and make sure your visa details, application process, documents are ready for them to make a decision. So when the case officers and the Department of Home Affairs, they receive it, they're ready to make a decision on your visa. That typically helps speed up processing times. So it's 5 stages. Once your visa is approved, you have 12 months to make an initial entry. So that's like a holiday. You enter once, then you can leave. It kind of activates your visa. And then you've got varying amounts of grace period to make your permanent move to Australia. That really depends on which visa you applied for. But you do have time to make your permanent move. It's not, you don't need to rush overnight kind of thing. Once your visa is granted, you have typically up to 2 years or more for a grace period to make that permanent move, right? So it's up to you how you plan that. So this is the visa process for each of the visas we have talked about today. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. We'll be very happy to answer them as best as we can. What I want to talk about next is the age waiver. So I mentioned it earlier. The age waiver is a provision where you only qualify for one of the lower tier ones. So let's say the subclass 188A or subclass 188B, which has age limits. But so you don't have the assets to invest $5 million, which has no age limit. But you think that you still would like to apply. And in this kind of situation, what happens is you have to apply for an age waiver to the different states. Not every state has an age waiver provision. It's on a case-by-case basis. But if you're looking at the investor program or you're looking at a business program with an age waiver, then you're going to have to invest typically about 50 to 100% more. So whatever they've asked for a normal applicant to invest, maybe $2.5 million or maybe $900,000, depending on the investor program or business program, they'll typically ask for about 50 to 100% more. And it's still on a case-by-case basis, or they'll ask for more employment of a local workforce. So it's a different combination for the different states. If you'd like us to look through the age waiver for you, we definitely need to know more about your profile, your investor profile, or your business profile to see if it's a practical option to the states that you may be interested in. Now, we're going to go through why apply in this current environment, in this kind of COVID, hopefully coming out of COVID post-pandemic environment over the next couple of slides. But there are quite a few benefits and quite a few updates at this stage of 2022, which you need to be aware of, especially if you're looking at the business and investor migration program.
So you should be seeing the why apply now slide. So I'm going to go through those. Now, I've gone through this in some of the other slides. So this is a couple months ago. They're looking at expanding the business and investor migration program, and they're trying to recover from COVID. So I think if you've seen the news recently, Australia, basically, they're saying COVID is kind of on the end run, and they want more and more people to come in. So this is what the Minister for Population, Cities, well, he's currently at the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship, and basically Home Affairs as well. And what they've done, this is a slightly older slide, but for the 2020-2021 migration year and continue on 2021-2022 migration year, the total intake for the business and investor migration program is about 13,500 people, which is about double of the slide I shared earlier, which showed that about 7,000 people were approved in a given year. So it's double of what it normally is. Will it continue to be double indefinitely? It's a little bit hard to say, but it's definitely makes them more space for people to be selected. And if we're going to have an update, and it says February, but I made these slides like last week, but February 2022 update in terms of what's currently happening with COVID, border restrictions. This is kind of what's currently happening. So if you see on screen, you can see that the Australian government has kind of fully open to tourists as well, and pretty much all visa types, students, business visas, investor visa holders, and so on. And what they've said in terms of travel restrictions, if you're fully vaccinated under the vaccination programs that they recognize, then after the 21st of February 2022, which was about 2 weeks ago, you can enter Australia with no quarantine. So from being one of the most locked down borders in the world, now it's pretty much, as long as you're vaccinated, it's pretty much completely open. In terms of visas being processed, especially for the investor program and business program, that hasn't stopped. We've had business and investor migration clients approved throughout the pandemic, more so in 2021 when things started to normalize a little bit more. And a lot of my clients, a lot of John's clients, Jason's clients, they're actually already in different parts of Australia starting to do the setup for the businesses, or they've already started doing the investments with the fund managers, which I talked about earlier. So again, if you're looking at investing into the funds, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to introduce you to them, because we're getting a lot of questions asking about where the headquarters need to be. Do we know a fund manager in New South Wales and Victoria? And the answer is we do. The fund has to be set up very specifically. You can't just choose any random fund manager, because that risks your conversion to permanent residency later on. Yeah, we do have quite a few questions on whether or not you can invest in residential property as the fund. I'll try and cover that a bit later on. So these are some of the things that was Australia was saying earlier in 2021. So like November 2021, lifting travel restrictions, and then after by January 2022, they're saying, well, February, we're going to fully reopen, and they really did fully reopen. The first flights to Western Australia, which is one of the most locked down states in the entire world. Western Australia didn't even open to the rest of Australia to go in. They opened up, I think, last week or earlier this week, and one of the first flights was from Singapore down to Western Australia. So that kind of covers everything that's currently happening in terms of movement across. In terms of the investor migration program, business program, it kind of has maintained how it's meant to be since 2021 until now. So no major changes there. What we're going to do is, if you see on the next slide, we're going to invite everybody to do some one-on-one consultations. We get a lot of specific questions about FRB, about 188B, 188C, where the money, and the reality is all of your profiles are slightly different. We know how to handle them all, but it's hard to answer everybody's question exactly for your different profiles in this webinar. So here's the things that we kind of have as part of our services. Obviously, processing the visas, not a problem. We've done, I think, 150 to date. So we've got lots of visas across the line. We're very happy to do your asset checks, your revenue checks, your share ownership checks. We can do all that for free, because some people are asking, what if I own 100% of company A, but 20% of company B, and the company B is my relative's company. Sometimes that works. So we'll have to see the exact makeup. So please book this in. Introduction to the fund managers. That's very important. There are hundreds of fund managers in Australia. Not everybody qualifies to do this program correctly. There are plenty of fund managers out there which you can invest in. They'd be happy to take your money. But when it comes to the time to convert to residency, if they didn't break it down correctly in the first place, not to mention you don't want to choose a fund manager that's going to lose you money. But if you didn't break it down correctly in the first place, then you won't be able to convert to residency. So that's a big issue that's happened before. A lot of people ask us about, do we know people to set up businesses for us, corporate secretaries, taxation, fund managers, property developers, builders? And the answer is yes. Obviously, we need to know more details. We can introduce you to ready-made business solutions in like Western Australia. There's some there in different parts as well. Especially in property development, if you're interested, WA has quite a few ready-to-go business solutions. Do reach out to us as well. So the link is here, and I'm going to try and put it here as well. Yeah, so go ahead and fill that in. Let us know if you need us to introduce you to the fund manager, your business details and basics. Just click that, fill it in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through some of the questions that's being asked, and try and go through whatever questions you guys might have, right? So let's go through some of the most popular questions. So we're talking about both of the investor visas, right? So let's talk about the 188B, 188C. A lot of people know about these two visas and asking us questions about these visas. Top question is, can you buy residential property for 188B and 188C under the balancing investment 50% proportion? And the answer is, well, not directly. You can't say I'm going to buy a house and plonk it there. You need to use a specialized fund manager who can set up a specialized fund specifically for you for the balancing component to put your house under. And again, it can't be the full 50%. It has to be a proportion of that. So the answer is yes, but you can't go and buy like 15 houses, for example, and put it there. But what we'll do is we can, if you're interested in doing that kind of setup, use the link here or reach out to us anyhow, any way you can. We'll introduce you to the fund managers directly. They will explain how that works, right? So that's one of the top questions. Second question that's really popular is the money invested in either of these programs capital guaranteed? And the answer is no, covered in the FAQ. It is a market fund. However, having said that, the fund managers that we recommend typically conservative with your money. They target, I think on the lowest end, the guys that we recommend target about 6.7% interest per annum. Obviously, it varies, but that's what they're targeting. I don't think anybody's lost money yet. They're conservative. They're prudent with your funds because they invest specifically for investor visa holders. So if their fund doesn't do well, then more investors won't come to use them. So their fund is there to consolidate and manage your investments so that you qualify for the conversion to the permanent residency, right? So those are some of the questions on the investor visa. On the business visa side, a lot of people are asking things like, do I need to start a business when I go over? And the answer is yes. You have to have a business running here, and then you have to start a business when you go to Australia. Now, the different states have different requirements as well. So depending on which state you want to go to, there might be a points requirement. There might be an industry requirement, meaning that they only allow investments into specific industries, like maybe technology, maybe health, medical services. Some will allow like food and beverage manufacturing and so on. So over the last week, I've talked to a couple of restaurant chain owners, and they've been asking, can I open a restaurant chain similar to mine in Australia? And then the answer is, it really depends which state you're looking at. Some of the states, yes. Some of the states, case by case basis, and some of the states will say no, right? So again, use the link, fill it in, and we'll kind of assess your individual profile, right? We have a couple of questions about, how long does it take? Is there priority processing? And the reality is, it varies. 188C typically is the fastest. So you're looking at 6 months or so, because that's typically when they ask for the investment. When they ask for the investment, then that's just before they give you the visa. 188B is a bit longer. You're looking at 12 months or so, maybe a little bit after that. And 188A with the business visa is about that kind of time frame as well. Some people are asking, I've only become a shareholder for of the company, but it's been around for 20 years, plenty of revenue. Would I qualify? And the answer is, again, it depends. Is it a family company? Could you use trust deeds and these kind of things, deed polls? Well, reach out to us. We'll have a look through. If you just bought a company and you have had no track record of company ownership before that, and it's not a family company, then probably not. You might be better off using the 188B pathway. If you do 188B pathway, you can kind of do anything on the side for whatever you're doing. So if you've invested on any of the investor visas, if you want to start a business on the side, you have full rights to do so anyway, right? But again, do fill in the link, and we'd be very happy to do so. Let's see if there are any. We've got like 30, 40 questions. What type of investments do they count for assets? We do have a lot of questions asking, is my property considered an asset? And the answer is yes. However, for some of the visas, it says you need to show an investment asset. You need to have shown that you've had investments for a certain period of time. So for example, here in Singapore, if your house is worth $3 million, let's just say you convert it, it's about 3 million Aussie dollars. Would you qualify for the 188B, which is the investor visa? With your house alone, if you're living in it, no, right? They'll need to look at other things as well. They'll need to see, oh, do you have investments elsewhere? Do you run a business? Different combinations, right? But if you have your house and you're trying to apply for the business visa, which says, oh yeah, you need to show me X amount of net assets. In that case, yes, you can use your house, right? Again, it is valuation, market valuation. You need to use a proper valuer, which we can introduce you to, less the outstanding mortgage on it, whether or not it is to CPF or HDB or private bank who's managing your mortgage. That's not a problem as well. All right. Let's see. We're probably going to I'll take 2 more questions and then we'll probably call it a day. I will try and send this, I'll try and set up this video somewhere and try and send it out to everybody. But you'll have to give me a little bit of time to kind of do that. One question is, does it matter, if I want to go to a specific state for any of these programs, can I just choose one state and live somewhere else? And the answer is, you kind of have to have an idea of where you want to go. So every state has different requirements. So, be mindful of that, and reach out to us if you want the breakdown of a specific state. Like Victoria, they need this amount of revenue, or this amount of investments, this amount of points, and so on, right? And one of the popular questions, which I'm going to answer now, is there a minimum investment period for the fund? And the answer is yes. It's the minimum investment period is 3 years. It's going to be at least 3 years, because 3 years is the minimum time until you're allowed to convert it to permanent residency, and you cannot pull the fund until your permanent residency is granted. So I'd say typically you're holding the investment for approximately 4 or up to 5 years. It varies depending on your situation, but it's definitely at least 3 years. On average, it's 4. Sometimes a little bit higher than that. And I'll take the last question I'm going to take is, what is the most popular state and what is the easiest state? Okay, so obviously subjective, but based on our experience, and we've done applications to pretty much every state, Western Australia is going to be the easiest state to kind of select you for business visas. And for 188B, it's kind of even across, but 188B, Western Australia, South Australia for 188A, 188B, these are 2 of the easiest states. They take many types of businesses, very open about investment. For most popular, that's going to be Victoria and New South Wales, so Melbourne and Sydney. What are the requirements for them? Varies a little bit. For the business program, you're going to have to invest in specific sectors or types of businesses. For the investor program, they have a slight difference, is that there's going to be a slight points threshold. You have to have this many points and above. We've just submitted an application to Victoria late last week. So, that they have this specific threshold. New South Wales and Victoria, if you're applying for the 188C, I think they get back to you within 30 days, maybe 1 week in some cases. It depends how quick you answer all their questions, but they can invite you very quickly. And then that kind of starts the clock running for the actual processing. All right. So I think we're going to probably call it an end here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, but thank you so much for everybody for joining us. I will try and get in contact with everybody in some way. I know I promised a lot of you that we would connect you to our fund manager. We'll be very happy to do that. I'll look through the emails and some of the messages that everybody's sent here, and we'll start reaching out to you privately through our panelists and through our colleagues and get you connected. All right. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks for all the fantastic questions, and we'll see you soon. Have a good weekend ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.